Hello, everyone. Now for something a little different. No presentations. So just questions, because these people have presented already. And you can only get speakers to present so many times before they start complaining. I guess everybody knows me. I'm John Demang. I will be unless something disastrously goes wrong, I will be the 4th director of KMI, starting on the 1st of August. People have been talking about things that they know and things that people don't know. I was thinking about this mixing in the cooking, really got my attention that Mark and Tom were doing. And I was thinking about the directors. So a fact that, I don't know if many of you know, that if you look at the birthplace of the 4 directors, including myself, none of them were born in the UK, and they cover 4 continents. So there'll be a quiz later to work out which person belongs to which continent. So what will happen is you can tweet a question to the @KMIOU or #KMIOU. Then it will go, and then Kate will filter them for the ones that she deems to be relevant and send them to me. And we can have questions from the floor. So the topic of the panel, which is up there, which should be the topic of the questions, is what is next for knowledge media. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I can have a look.
Given that there are no master of ceremonies for 40 minutes, can I ask you a question?
40 minutes. I have 40 minutes.
No, for me,
no. No, but you said I have 40 minutes.
No.
I know.
Yeah, you have.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I step out of the master of ceremonies...
It's not on?
Hello?
Yes.
So if I step out from my role as master of ceremonies, can I ask a question then?
Yeah.
I was raising my hand, but you were...
I just wanted to confirm that I have 40 minutes.
Yeah, we're...
So even though it's late. So you heard it, okay? So I have 40 minutes for the panel. Okay, yes.
I suppose it would be nice to go to the refreshments.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, so yeah, basically my question is in terms of mismatch between sort of expectations and reality. I guess this is probably a question more for Sir John and Mark, but of course also Frank and Marcus may. You know, I'm sure you guys had certain expectation about what was going to happen, and maybe there was a mismatch. Certain things that you had not predicted happen, and things that you were expecting to happen didn't happen. So, do you have something that really was the biggest surprise, either positive or negative?
Do you want to start? No, it's your question. Well, I think for me, I mean, I'm going to take obviously a broad view of higher education because that's what I do. I think the biggest surprise has been the way that MOOCs have been a media sensation, still are in Europe. I think they're dying out a bit in North America as a media sensation, and have got people engaged with online in a way that would have never happened before. And I think the challenge for what next for knowledge media is to steer that in sensible directions.
Yes, I think I would say there are lots of the technologies themselves. We were talking about sexy technologies and so on. There were lots of examples that evolved that we did not foresee, which were great fun to work on and exciting. But there were also some disappointments, and I guess the biggest disappointments for me were probably, one, we never succeeded in creating KMI Limited. It was something I really, really, really wanted to do. And there was a phase when a lot of us worked very, very hard on it. Anyway, it didn't happen. And that is a huge, huge failure, in my opinion. Now, it's related to what I said before. It's harder to make money than I thought. But separately from that, I always thought there should be a spin-off called KMI Limited that should have a symbiotic relationship with the lab. So, and I couldn't do it, and it's hard. Anyway, so that was a disappointment. And the other one is, I was saying over lunch that I feel, especially with primary education, KMI people did a lot of work with schools and I felt it hasn't fundamentally changed what's going on in schools. But this is a lifelong disappointment because I've been involved in this area for 40 years probably. And there's always ideas where you read about whatever, with Seymour Papert, with Logo and so on. Wow, awesome stuff and so on. My current view is that it's had zero impact on education, basically. There are some cool schools doing few cool things with it, but so that's a disappointment, basically. I'm still upbeat and optimistic, but you asked, so I'm saying. You guys, well, I don't know if you guys have.
Okay, so maybe this is a blasphemy in this celebration, but it's about the crossover between knowledge and media, right? So we've been working together for decades now, right? As long as I've been married to my wife, and we've been working on knowledge all the time, right? I never saw much in our collaborations. I never saw much crossover between knowledge and media, and so there are the media guys, right? So from my perspective, I was always a little bit wondering why the two were under the same roof. But maybe that's an outsider's mistake. It could be. But
Can I? Well,
Go on.
no. There were cases where they were under the same roof to force that crossover, basically.
okay.
That
So then the question would be: has it done as well as you would have?
Has it
hoped?
happened? There are cases where it has, where you have the guys from the, loosely speaking, the guys from the knowledge technology side have worked with the designers who are more or less on the media side, the multimedia side. They've worked with them, and the tools that have been developed on the knowledge technology side are vastly better, basically, as a result, because they inhabit the same space. And I think equally the tools on the media side that are smarter than they would have been, and some of it's by chance encounters over the coffee machine, basically, and that was the hope, and it's happened. So I don't know if you guys want to elaborate on that. I suppose.
Peter?
I just wanted to, what I would say is, to answer Frank's question is, the way I view it is, why they should be under the same roof is, you need the knowledge stuff, the semantics, so you have automation at scale, and then you need the media because people are going to use this. So one thing I say to my team when I hire them is, please don't design the interfaces yourself. Right. Please go to the graphic designers at least, and then the other media people. So you'll see, you may have noticed over the years that, without boasting, that all the KMI technologies tend to look nice. And that wasn't because of the knowledge people, believe me. That was because of the other people in there. So Mark had this idea of embedding graphic design people at the start of KMI, which is quite unusual for a lab to do that. People thought it was unusual, but it was one of the many great decisions that he made. I have a question here.
John has a question here.
Oh, sorry, John. Go on.
My name is John Fox. I teach a course in cognitive science and systems engineering to final year engineers in Oxford. And I've been doing that for a number of years. And most of that wide-ranging course, and most of it I have to, I don't use Frank's phrase, but it's perfectly descriptive. It's a combination of theory and dance, or theory and practice. And when I come to knowledge engineering and talking about ontologies and how you're going to design the content of a knowledge, I have to tell them it's a black art. Do you think that is still the truth? Are we moving towards a theory of knowledge structuring and content, or are we going to have to live with practice, at best, for a while to come yet?
I tend to agree. Hi, John. I didn't realize you were here, by the way. John is the original knowledge media guy, basically. I tried many years to lure you into KMI, but anyway, so I'm pleased to see you here. But anyway, so I think yes, I would agree. It's a black art. I've always felt that in my cynical moments, I don't want to toss around too much cynicism. My cynical moments about cognitive science, that if I had to choose between hiring a good cognitive scientist, whatever that may mean, and a good designer, I would in fact go for the designer, basically. And I shouldn't have to make that choice. But the designer has some skill that I don't understand, and it is really critical to stir things up. So to me, it's a mystery, basically. Anyway,
I'm going to have to come to the defense of my field.
go on.
I can't let this go. I can't let John get away with this. I know you. I hope you're asking this provocatively. So I think in your question, I think you're underestimating the art in other branches of engineering. So, sort of electrical engineering or civil engineering all sounds very nice, but there's a lot of art and tradition and unspoken knowledge being passed on there as well. So that's one. And I also think you're underestimating the engineering part in knowledge engineering. I think if you take just the plain old Common Cats book that Bob and Guus Schreiber wrote in the late 90s, we're still teaching from that material, and the students can use it as base recipes for building a wide variety of systems. So I think it has become more engineering than just plain black art.
The question was really about theory. Is there a theory of content? Could you imagine a theory of content? Or is that just what happens?
Okay, right. So you're saying it's like civil engineering, but we're not having the maths. Right.
So you talk about
Right.
patterns, but is there a logic
Yes.
to those patterns?
Fair enough.
Principles are there?
Right.
Sorry.
Yes.
Picking up your notion of patterns, which I think are hugely important, is there a kind of theoretical underpinning for the kinds of patterns that designers, will be able to use and trust?
Fair point. I think we have a catalog of those patterns, but we don't have the theory. Fair point. Yeah, interesting point. There's your challenge, Enrico.
Was there a question from Fridolin? Did you have your hand up? Yeah. Okay.
We do stuff in the lab that is in the crossover zone, especially what I do in my group. We do augmented reality as a knowledge medium, and that's exactly in between those camps where we deal with more semantic description languages that are used in industry, for example, for technical documentation, and recoding that into experiences that you can have with wearable computing. While at the same time, we cherish, of course, the beauty, aesthetics, user experience provided by bespoke applications developed that provide a completely different user experience than anything that you can script and describe. But it's exactly this, I think, this liminal zone in between that makes it so interesting.
Okay, Hassan.
So I have a question to Mark and Peter, actually. So Peter mentioned before that we developed several technologies in the past that the world wasn't ready for. So how do you see the situation right now? And can we, for example, plan for the future where we develop technologies that the world is ready for?
Well, are you happy for me to go? I have a slightly different view from Peter, by the way, on this. And I said, much as I love all of those examples, as everybody knows, I disagree that the world wasn't ready for it. My view is, my view is that the user is always right. If people are not adopting the technology, then we haven't done something right. We haven't transitioned it properly with the technology handover. We haven't done something right. So I think the world is ready for it. Which is a slightly different thing than you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, so hands up on that one. I did call it a joke, right?
Oh.
And the reason I call it a joke is that clearly it's the case. If you do something and you don't do it twice, 3 times, and the 4th time it fails, because you clearly haven't done it right. And it's worth looking at why those things went wrong. And my answer was that none of those things were technical things. Yeah. We got the technology bang on. We did some great, that was why it was a joke. We got the technology brilliantly right years before anybody else got it right. And still, we couldn't get user adoption, user interest. Because it is the case that Even in a world like KMI with cameras everywhere and people switched on and people enthusiastically using it, I mean, that system, Hexagon, which I love, lasted for very many years before we finally switched it off on the basis that nobody else other than us wanted to use it. The places where it failed, there was very good reasons why it failed. And they're still true today, I think, because no matter how clever the technology, if it's something that people don't really want to do, then, then perhaps you should try doing something else.
Would that suggest that we should work on marketing, let's say, to convince people to adopt these technologies? For example, I mean, talking about now big companies like Apple or Microsoft, they create technologies and then convince people to use the technologies, right?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think we should be marketers. And actually, I don't think it's a huge problem, actually, to do some things that don't work. In a sense, it's also the case, if you're not doing some things that don't work, you're not being adventurous enough, actually. But you need to be honest about why it didn't work. We're being adventurous, we're doing things beyond the edge, and you need to be honest about what the failure was. If it wasn't a technical failure and the stack didn't blow up and so on, the service stayed up, the bandwidth was adequate, you thought through all of those things, and it still didn't get users as switched on as you thought they should be switched on, then you need to rethink through what the mix is around that. And if it isn't the technology, it's other things. For example, one of the things that occurred to me in the virtual degree ceremony context, we were missing out on some of the things that degree ceremonies were really about. And one of those is ownership by the university and the caring of the university's feeling about those sorts of things. Because we were kind of focused on whether the student was having a good time.
Okay.
But actually, there were only one stakeholder in quite a complex process. And we hadn't really thought through all of the other stakeholders in this process. And that was probably, that was our fault, absolutely.
So, yeah, I'd just like to say something. So we have a lot of bright people in the room, a lot of researchers in KMI who are encouraged to think outside the box. And Mark was talking about audacious and being bold. But I think we should try and follow the rules a little bit for what a panel is, yeah? So we should really ask the panelists, on the stage. I mean, that's normal, rather than asking the people in the audience. I mean, I didn't want to, but I mean, we got away with it once, yeah? But let's try and ask the panelists on the stage questions. Especially as Peter, I know Peter's leaving soon, yeah? But let's give him a break. Kitty, yeah.
I don't care who answers this one, because I think it's for everybody. But the word that hasn't come up, but you've come close to it just now, is emotions. So I think when you talk about meaning, meaning and emotions go together, and a lot of what the failures, I think, have been about is not generating the right kind of emotion in the right audience. So your last example, the students liked it because they couldn't attend except by this route, and therefore there was an investment in it. The administrators didn't like it because it was an added bit of hassle. And usually human beings go either for something that is easy, like falling off a log, or because it's exciting and emotionally attractive, and they love it, and they just have to hack it. And you can see that with children. So for me, the big challenge is looking at how you can pull this stuff and make it emotionally appealing and use what you're doing for meaning to try and evoke emotions. I mean, anyone who works with kids knows that it's either going to be so easy they just do it, or it's really got to be something they want to do.
I'd make two comments about the degree ceremony before you flagellate yourself too much. The first one is that nothing lasts forever. You know, it may not be failure, it may be just fashion. But I think the other answer I'd make, I have presided at 150 or so Open University degree ceremonies and shaken the hands and talked to individually, something like 50,000 graduates. It's not about the students so much as it's about their families, and that's probably a missing link in this thing.
Fridolin, you have the microphone again. Okay.
all of you manage. So my question would be, can you plan for innovation, and what is the stages that innovation has to run through to become something with impact and velocity?
Okay, I jump on that one. I think you can do certain things to enable this. So I cite a colleague of mine, Paul Kirschner, like it's always like you have models in groups, how you work together, forming, storming, norming, so how you develop ideas, how you go together. But I think it's a lot also what I see now in our institute, and I think also I think Peter did a great job, and the other colleagues, I don't know that well, but we worked together for quite some time, is about building the trust and enable people to fail. Because, I mean, yeah, you built all these systems. That's the main thing. You did it. You built something, and you learned something from it. Because your question before, I mean, okay, do you want to create a business? Okay, then it's probably not good if you get 100,000 pounds from the bank and you don't succeed with your business. But here we're talking about research. We're talking about learning how to do things right. So you have to fail. And I think this is a central component for creating an environment in which you dare to fail, and which you contradict to your supervisor and say, no, I think you're wrong. And this is one aspect.
I'd add to that it seems to me it's quite important, if you're looking to innovate towards a need that's perceived out there. And there are plenty of those in higher education, caused by the drivers of people wanting it to cost less, people wanting a much tighter link with employment, and then of course the whole technology thing. So if you can help with some of those problems, you're probably better off than thinking in the abstract. I mentioned Tony Bates's new book earlier. One of the excellent things about Tony's book is he spends about the first 50 pages exploring what people need to learn in a digital age. Whereas I think too much innovation in the learning space takes for granted what that is, whereas in fact it's changing substantially. And if one starts with the way it's changing, one might innovate to serve it better.
Can I? So I want to say two things. And first, with respect, I'm going to disagree a little bit with what you said about innovating towards a need. So Steve Jobs, who was one of the great innovators, he said, don't listen to your users too much. Now, if you'd asked users what they want, we never had a smartphone. Because people, you couldn't even imagine what it was before you saw the first one. So strictly innovating towards a need also limits somehow the horizon. So I think you should also be courageous enough to innovate towards something where nobody thinks they want it anyway. Second comment is, I don't think you can plan for innovation, but I think you can facilitate it, right? And there's a great book, I forget the author, the title is Where Great Ideas Come From. Anybody knows the book? I forget the title. And he did a very careful analysis of environments, both current and in the past, that were successful at innovation, and he identifies really concrete things. And so there are things like what you said, encourage trust, right? So that allow people to fail. You don't look like a fool if you failed. Allow for noise, right? So don't focus only, because you need noise to get that unexpected connection. Allow slow thinking. So unlike the romantic idea of the eureka moment, now, great inventions take years of slow cooking, right? To use your metaphor. So this whole book is really full of about a dozen of these very concrete facilitators, but that's not planning, right?
Also, just to add, I mean, it's a similar point, but I never knew how to plan for innovation. So, I always thought the best I could do was hire for attitude, basically, hire people according to their attitude. And so, is Alan Fletcher here? There he is. Can I tell you that little story you just reminded me of? Or do you want to tell it about the question I asked you when we hired you? Yeah, go on.
So, hi,
It's officially breaking my rule again, but it's
Oh,
okay.
sorry. But he tells it better than me.
I'll come on the thing if you want. But I've been at KMI for 8 years, and Mark was on the panel that interviewed me. And at the time, one of the things that I explained to, because I came from a 20-year commercial background, I'd never worked in higher education, and the panel said to me, well, you know, why? Why do you want to come and work at the OU? And I was very honest and said, a few weeks ago, I went out for a walk with my dog and realised that I hated my job. Just hated my job and went to do something different. And I saw this advertised and applied. So Peter Scott was on the panel and Enrico was on the panel. And Peter asked me something about my career trajectory and why I thought that the Open University was appropriate. Enrico asked me something about what I knew about computer science and how I felt that moving the transition from where I was working in commerce into higher education would be appropriate. Mark looked at me and said, what type of dog have you got?
So thank you. Yes. So, you know, some of it's about the attitude and the body language. We have a huge number of examples of hires in KMI that were, I don't know if any, well, I won't give the examples, but a lot of people hired because they had a
Good dog.
a good attitude, basically. And CV, well, who knows, you know, it wasn't so important. And that leads to innovation, basically. So.
There's a question. Hitesh?
I'm Upendra. I'm from Tech Mahindra, very close by here in Milton Keynes. My question is about relationship of focus, concentration, and knowledge media. What goes ahead? My observation is that my son, a lot of his friends, are probably losing their concentration because of this ubiquitous media access today. I don't know, is there a relationship between this, flipping channels or going through lots of YouTube or, trying to learn with a 3-minute video on a subject kind of thing versus research, which is quite intensive, deep, and trying to break through some big issues over a long period of time to really do a root cause and get a solution out of it. Any observations, sir?
Well, can I leap in? It's a big problem. It's a great question. And Kitty is now the expert on neuroscience, but let me just say, there's a fantastic neuroscience study that was done that I just read about a couple of months ago, has pretty much proven that all of this, the so-called continuous partial attention, multitasking, and so on, is really, really bad for your health, basically. It's really bad. And they point to, there are studies from decades ago that are analogous, but very crudely, just to give you the idea, when they had rats pressing on a bar that directly stimulated the pleasure center in the brain, they would do that to the exclusion of everything else, and they died, basically. And the short-term, the fix that you get, there is a real buzz from that next Twitter message, that next email. It's self-fulfilling. And it's very dangerous, basically, because it's self-fulfilling in the same way as the rat pressing that button without getting his food. So it's dangerous. So I'm as guilty as the next person. I love creating those technologies, but some of them are dangerous.
Can I? Yeah, I take a different view. So I have 2 daughters. They're at school at the moment. One's taking the GCSEs, which is a bit stressful on the family. So I think if you look at history, every time there's a new media comes out, scare stories come out. So newspapers were going to, apparently at one time when crosswords came out, they thought nobody would do any work anymore. So it's just another of those things. When the printing press was invented, the church thought it would destroy people's souls because it had the Bible that had come out from the oracle. So I just think it's just the same along those paths. So anyway,
probably I would add on to this direction. I mean, first the question is there might be such studies. I mean, I'm not a big fan of these recent trends towards neuroscience things. I mean, there's also a lot of things you could explain with cognitive psychology approaches from my point of view. But anyway, there might be this results. The interesting question is also what's the conclusion in that? And there I really see a big problem, because the typical conclusion in the public you see, and there we talk about communication, is, okay, media are bad. I mean, let's take a different point of view on that. My son recently started to play Clash of Clans, so he's 7. So he didn't really start, but of course you know how it goes. Where's the tablet? Oh, can I look for my village? Oh, yeah, half an hour later, oh, probably I should look for my village. No. So it's a question of balance, but as Peter told before, I think, you should not see this. This is now, these are digital media and these are analog media. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of possibilities we have. And if you look at what teachers do, I mean, the main challenge for them is to create an integrated ecosystem in their teaching, because that's not what they're doing. If you go to school, and I can tell you one practical example, I'm now doing teaching in this school. So at the beginning, my idea was to go there and talk to the teachers and say, oh, what are you doing in your teaching? How are you using, do you use a word processor? Okay, now I ended up giving a course for third graders on the internet. And the kids ask me, how do I use Google? I mean, there is a big problem. It's not a problem of the media as such, it's a problem of the usage, yeah? And how to integrate that and what's the perspective on that. It's not like digital media here and analog media there. I think this is complete nonsense. It's like digital natives, and so that's myths, yeah?
I don't think anyone was making that claim.
No, but yeah, probably it got one point, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a good point. Yeah.
So I'll ask a question to the whole panel. So what most excites them at the moment in the knowledge media area? What do they find most exciting?
What about passion technologies? What are the things that make knowledge sexy? What makes us more engaged? What makes us pay attention and focus? What are the passion technologies that we should invest more research into?
Just one follow-up on this. I think the important question is, and that links to that as a conclusion, we could also think of how to design technologies to support focus, yeah? And in some cases, there's a clear way where this leads to distraction. But what for me also is a sign of good learning is if you get so immersed in the process of your own learning that you don't even realize that you're learning. And that in that point, it gets you get emotionally involved, you don't think, oh, another 15 minutes to go to learn vocabulary, yeah? So, but you probably get fun out of it, you get interested in it, you get curious in what's next.
So I have a thought that kind of relates to these two questions, and a question we had a preview of from John about scale. I don't know if it's fair to bring that in, but in a way, the thing that I find exciting is not a very specific topic as such, but it's the fact of the big scale that Frank talked about and was implicit in the Kennedy moon launch audio and so on, that there's no longer any limit. So a PhD student can come along with some huge problem, like they want to deal with, they want to analyze all of the world's tweets for emotional content or whatever. Okay, that's a cool topic. So there's no longer a fear of big scale, and big scale is, in my view, is really, really important for moving from little prototypes to tackling big real-world problems. And that, to me, is very exciting.
Can I add to that? Because my answer would also revolve around scale. So so this big scale that we are now achieving, so big things become really possible. I think it ties back to also your question that still hurts about, oh, you have a collection of methods, but you don't have underlying theory. So this scale is now also becoming this fantastic observatory, right? So in a way, every element of the Common Cats library is a little experiment, a little observation, but they were very insular and very small scale. And we can now do these observations at really massive scale. It's like suddenly we have a Hubble telescope, whereas before, when we were looking at the sky with the very poor binoculars. Now we have this Hubble telescope. We can build amazing applications, and I think it will get us to some insights in really the structure of knowledge and the underlying theory that we can only get because we now have this Hubble telescope. I think that ties in with what Mark was saying.
So time is running out, but Matthew, be the last question. So,
that's a slightly more practical question, but it relates to everything that has been said. And it comes from you, Mark, saying that one of your key disappointments was not having created KMI Limited. And that certainly resonates a lot with me. But also with some of the way I interpret some of the things Frank is saying, which is that a lot of the focus in the semantic web community lately has been on creating industrial relevance and making sure that the big kind of commercial guy pay attention to what we are doing, and actually that was very successful, but we might have forgotten something there. And that also very much resonates with me. So my question is, what do you think? Should we finally accept and decide that it is our role to be just the crazy excited researchers with a short attention span that would just, we just have to make the slightly impossible into the possible and leave others to do that? Or should we still try to find this component we are missing in KMI to have under the same roof this kind of excited innovation and the thing that makes really impact and commercial relevance?
But it seems to me you can do both. I don't think it's an either or. I mean, when I was asked to comment on the last research excellence framework, there was a requirement to have an impact assessment for, at least for the computer science discipline. And it seems to me, a lot of people moan about that. Oh, God, impact, I want to do my research, impact, okay, I'll fill in the form and we'll do a submission. But I think impact is really, really important. And I think it's okay to have it's more than okay. I think it's important to have a big impact. And there's no reason that should be divorced from your underlying research. I mean, I don't see why you can't do both, basically. So I'm not sure if this...
The question is, what do you think? What is the component? Why we haven't cracked it if there is no reason why we couldn't?
I honestly don't know. I would say within the OU, you've got the world's greatest test bed for doing anything and having a huge impact. I know Zdenek showed me last time I visited some of this cool stuff he's doing with predicting which students might fail, for example, using some of these knowledge technologies and so on. To me, it's fantastic, and it has a huge impact. And there are loads of examples around just within the OU, and one can have impact outside the OU too. But it's a great test bed. I mean, for me, the secret of getting let's say walking the tightrope as an academic, there's a tightrope walk between doing the stuff for which you're earning a salary, which in academia is typically teaching or writing course units at the OU, and doing this, on the other hand, doing the stuff for which you get promoted, which is research. So there's this inherent schizophrenic life that an academic leads, because you're paid to do one thing, but you're promoted for the other. The secret of walking the tightrope is actually to do research about which you can teach, or that's about your teaching, or about which you can develop stuff that impacts on your students. The OU is a dream place to do that. So you can walk the tightrope, have an impact, get your research publications, and so on. So that's my advice.
Okay. So officially we're out of time, but the Master of Ceremonies has given me an extension, so he can ask a comment, make a comment. Yes.
Yeah, no, just a quick.
Nico gave him a time extension so he can make the comment.
Is the microphone?
Yes,
yeah?
it's on.
No, I just I cannot resist. I need to intervene because I think I mean Peter. Peter made this kind of half joke that the world is not ready, and we are now talking about impact. But it's also true that I mean the OU. Although we are all here because we all think the OU is one of the greatest organizations on earth and is really a flagship university at world level. In terms of, the EU is not very good at certain obvious impact channels that other universities have. So that maybe is becoming less of a problem now. But certainly historically, in the, let's say, first decade of KMI, 95 to 2005, let's say, certain groundbreaking technologies, like, we had Skype before Skype, we had Doodle before Doodle, and others. For example, Magpie is another one which I think Mark mentioned. There are now a number of commercial tools which are basically, some kind of pale imitation of Magpie 12 years later. Now, the OU at the time simply did not have the channels to do that, while other universities have. So I think that the important thing is not so much to, as Max was saying, to flagellate, to have this self-flagellation and say, but it is to make sure that in the next decade, those channels become really, really operational. And I think that's really a key element.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I should close the panel now.
Well, thank you very much to John and all the panelists.
Thank you.